A little bit of a cough today?
No, I am perfect.
Perfect?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Like a phone call, like a letter, like a transcript, like a coronavirus test. I am perfect.
Yeah. So we appreciate everyone tuning in despite the states of emergency that's
I mean, our viewership is so high because everybody's at home right now.
That's right.
But that's good. So what are we what's this whole series about? What are we doing?
The whole series.
Why the hell are people here?
Maybe we ask them? No, I'll tell you why I think they're here.
Okay.
So we're talking retention. We're talking about how do you not only just, last series we talked about conversions, so how do we gain those users, create more conversions, improve those numbers, but how do we keep them? So how do we keep them coming back, continue to be a subscriber, you know, if they have a subscription, keeping it running, understanding the value and that making sense to them, and bear hugging them.
Yeah,
how do we give them that bear hug, keep them where we want them, right? Them getting value out of our product, staying with us, staying as a happy customer. So how do we continue to communicate, deliver value? Yeah. So this one today, we're going to talk all about communicating, talking to our user base.
Yeah. Dear friend, I would like to discuss our correspondence is our name. So yeah, it's all about communication. So I know that in any relationship, if you don't communicate at all, obviously lots of challenges. I typically go home, I don't talk to my wife, I make sure that we stay in separate rooms and that we never talk to each other. That's not really what happens, but you can imagine where our relationship would go if that was the case. And so really this is the same thing if you have a user. If you want to maintain a quality relationship, you want things to go well, you want it to last a long time, you can't just go to your separate rooms and never talk. Yeah. And so the same thing is happening here for retention, is that we really have to have a great strategy around how do we communicate and maintain a good, loving relationship with our significant user.
And it starts with calling them friend.
That's right. I do, dear friend. They should be considered like that. If you almost think of your users as friends, that's something that maybe puts you in the right mindset of, hey, we want to keep them.
And joking aside, we'll actually talk a point on brand voice.
Yeah.
Every communication touch point that you have is an opportunity to emphasize that brand voice that you have. So if this is how you talk to users, okay, so be it. But it gives you an opportunity to build that relationship based on that brand message that you're delivering. So I think 100%. It's a lot of ways that you can look at this, but I think it's something to consider. And then just looking at our communication from a strategic standpoint and having a game plan going in.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different points in which we want to communicate. Obviously, there's the marketing and sales process, which we're not talking about as much because we're really focused on retention here. But then it's really looking at the onboarding process, which could be for some software companies a month, 2 months, 3 months long as it's getting implemented or things are getting set up. For others, like a game, maybe that onboarding process is an hour where they've signed up and there's some period before they really start using it. It doesn't matter. There's always some sort of period of onboarding.
Sure.
And then we've got support, obviously, as people have issues, updates and improvements as we're releasing new things for the software, all the way through training and brand. And then the one thing that's not really here for me is kind of that, exceeding expectations. It doesn't have to be for a purpose. Dear friend is kind of this idea of what are the other communications that we can give that don't have to be related to stages in the relationship. It's like, if I show up at home, just to use the analogy again, with some flowers on a random Tuesday, my wife is really going to appreciate that versus if I only do things on her birthday and Valentine's Day, and our anniversary. And
so, do you mind if I take some notes?
Yeah, if you want to. I am a relationship coach outside of this, so if you just want to ask me some questions, I can definitely help. But it is really that mindset, again, is these are monumental or main pieces that we look at in the relationship with our user, but then we have to remember to make sure that we exceed expectations by bringing up things even when it isn't. And that could be tips, that could be ideas, that could be just friendly general correspondence that they're having. So
Yeah.
a lot of different times that we can do strategic touch points. And I think the key is, we talked in one of our, I think in this show, about kind of that journey and the experience map of like, what are the experiences. When we're developing a strategic communications plan, we want to do this. We want to put together all of these pieces of what are the stages, what are the messages that we're putting out, and then even for those extra flowers on a Tuesday messages, how are we integrating those into our strategic plan through the life cycle of someone being in the relationship with us.
Yeah, for sure. Point on relationship, kind of the analogy is great because, whatever your software does, there's going to be certain inherent value that brings the user. But what you communicate, that is where you can go above and beyond without having any additional features in your product.
Right.
You can simply get in someone's good graces, or the opposite if you do it poorly, but you can maximize value just by creating a relationship through communication. Users getting used to hearing from you, getting those ideas, really learning how to maximize what they're doing. If you can be useful, helpful, let them leverage your tool better, that's just going to improve the relationship and
Agreed.
Stick around.
And I think most software companies see themselves as vendors, and most companies see software as just products that they're buying, but there is an opportunity to build a greater relationship there. Is that by providing great support, by including things that are potentially educational, by doing all of these things, you are developing a relationship that maybe pushes you towards that partner rather than vendor, and that then you're seen when it's a scenario that they're evaluating cuts that they have to make in the organization. They see it as more than just this transactional nature to it. And communication is definitely a foundation for how you maintain that relationship and build it so that it is something that's more like a partnership, and then you retain, reduce churn, which is what this is all about.
Yeah, and if you do some of this planning to these points, it's not a ton of work extra that you're doing to maintain more users, to keep your retention strong. So really some important steps, and then always be thinking, how do you deliver more value, and how can I communicate better with my users?
And today we'll talk about it in a second, but we've got systems that help ease the burden of managing this. It's really just about strategy and execution, and then measuring and optimizing, but really there's a lot of tools where it's not manual anymore, obviously. So what are we talking about here with communicate early and often?
Communicate early and often. It's like voting, right? Vote early and vote often. The idea here is that you typically have the opportunity to first kind of set the expectations for how you communicate and what your voice is and what your users should expect during that onboarding period. And that's great, and we know that we need to get in there and be pretty active and engaging them. But the challenge is that after that onboarding, you probably have a structure to the onboarding, and we're going to make sure they understand how to use the different features and make the different updates and use different things inside the tool. But once you get through all of those pieces for onboarding, it could drop off and you forget to continue the nurturing. And I think this is where the point on kind of value-added stuff that you mentioned, bringing out ideas and tips, and best practices and case studies and things like that to provide the user with more value, or maybe give them ideas on how they can make more use of your solution. That's where it can come through. But the point is if you start on a good, with a good onboarding process, that's a great start. But you don't want to just let it drop off from that point.
Yeah, I agree.
It's hard to get someone back paying attention to messages in today's world with everything that someone's bombarded with. So
well, and I always say that with email marketing, but it's the same within a software, is that if you don't deliver value and people build this idea that this is just a waste of a message, you want to communicate early and often, but always deliver value, I think, is one of those important pieces.
For sure. That's a great thing to add to that.
Automation, we just kind of hinted at this, but this is the huge opportunity, is that there are systems out there, and many of them that even work specifically with software companies, that we can take this strategy of communications, our onboarding messages, our messages that happen after a support ticket, our messages that are Tuesday flowers, whatever it might be, put them into a system, and it handles the process for us. So this is really something that helps teams leverage and make efficient the process of creating great communication.
Yeah.
And then I like the last point of behavior-based messages. The great thing about automation is that you can set up filters and channels where, if someone takes some specific action, they can be sent down a different path of messages.
Yeah, and when I was looking at that, I was thinking of, if you have a user or a segment of users that are only using like one certain feature, maybe they're just not aware of the other things that are inside of your app, and that's a good audience to kind of reach out to those people and say, hey, we know you're using this. Did you know it can also do this and that? It's those type of things to consider that. But due to the automation, marketing automation tools and platforms available, this isn't that difficult to implement this stuff. Same thing with like support follow-up. I often see follow-up messages after I submit a support ticket, it's closed out, and then I get like a survey, hey, rate the communication and whatnot. But wouldn't it be nice if there was kind of a follow-up touch saying, hey Andy, we know that you contacted us about X, whatever that issue was. How's everything going, and is there anything else you need?
Yeah.
We already have that information. We understand what they were looking for, and why not add that, go above and beyond a little bit. So.
And this stuff can even be triggered from things within our software. I think of very specific scenarios. Maybe we have a software that the price is based on the number of users. Someone goes to the users page, clicks a button to add one, but they don't because it's going to increase their plan. Mm-hmm. You could put them into an automation field that now explains why it's good to expand their team, tells them about like how even though it moves up, maybe there's some savings in other areas or unlocks other features. There's ways to take something that this becomes an upsell opportunity, that we're using triggers within the software to actually put people into message sequences that help explain why something happened or why they should move to the next package or whatever it might be. So we really have to think about that too, is it's not just automation that's set up outside the software. It can also be triggered based on a wide range of different actions that people take within it. And so this can help train, ease the process, all of those different things. And then obviously channels. So there's a number of channels. Talk about some of these ones that we've got here.
Yeah, so the obvious one is email. Everyone's going to use email, and email is not going anywhere, right? Everyone still has an email inbox, but you could do text messaging, in-app notifications, things like Facebook groups or Slack channels, forums, where you got users in there as well.
Right.
They all offer different opportunities, and I think what's important is testing out the different channels and get a sense. Different user bases are going to lean towards different methods of communication, and so don't try to force the square peg into the round hole. Do what works for your users. If they're not on Facebook, then don't create a Facebook group. Right. So do what works. The nice thing is you can track everything. I do think you want to communicate things across multiple platforms. So if you send out a text and an email and in-app notification, let's take a look and see, if people never respond to one of those methods, then maybe you do away with, the text, if that's the case. But I think we use the feedback that we get from our users to understand the most effective ways. Not everybody's going to want to receive information 100%. In the same ways. So.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely doing it across different channels. And you can even track data about which channels are being used, and even put users into different groups, because you get more effectiveness. Like this group is in text message, this group's in email. So there's a lot of different ways to do that.
For sure.
So that's smart. And then really finally, this community increases value and defines culture.
Yeah, so just kind of following on the point of, if you're using Facebook groups or Slack channels, sometimes just having that user forum where people can exchange ideas and learn from one another and share what they're doing, that can be really powerful. And so you might have users that are on your app and they are getting value out of that community. And so now that's starting to define the culture, the nature of, what kind of people are engaging with this, whether it's a game, whether it's, some type of enterprise software,
Yep.
whatever that is, you're going to get a sense of who the users are and other people that are like you, and you might get inherent value just out of the other users that are sharing. So consider the opportunity that exists with just the user base, creating a platform to communicate. Obviously, moderating it is a great idea. It's super important. At the same time, though, allowing that to kind of organically happen, sometimes that's your best friend is that organic conversation going on within a community.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point, and I think that is part of communication, is building that community, and then even encouraging different conversations, encouraging connections, all of those things. So,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Good. So I think that's all that we have on communication. Great topic. Just summarize. Have a strategy at the end of the day. What are the different major touch points? What are the nice things that you do in between that are kind of value and relationship builders? If we develop this smart strategy, we're taking the relationship from vendor to being more like partner, and really just improving the overall customer experience that's happening, doing that across different channels, and obviously starting to segment people by what channels they engage with the most, and then obviously bringing in some of this community piece that can really take what's pushing messages and become much more of an interactive experience. So definitely a great topic to help, I think, companies that are in SaaS retain users, is really making sure they get their correspondence game running well.
And I think this whole piece on communication, a lot of times you can have two different pieces of software that do the same functions, but one just spent more time and does a much better job in communicating, and they then offer more value, and they're the easy choice and obvious at that point. So pretty powerful.
And again, we've said this in a couple other episodes, but developers and development teams tend to think transactionally. It's like, I just send an email when this action happens, and it's one email to alert them that something happened, but not thinking about how they can exceed the expectations either in that interaction or thinking of it as a series to help build the relationship. And so I think one thing for software companies, a lot of founders, developers, especially when you're building an MVP and you're early in the process, your mindset is extremely transactional. But I don't think it has to be. I think you can build a software from the ground up thinking in this way of building a relationship. But then also, if you're already in the process, now's the time to reevaluate your communication strategy, and just change your mindset from being transactional to relational.
Yeah, great perspective.
So, yeah, very cool. So next week we're going to be talking about I'm more than just a pretty dashboard. And so really this comes down to, what is that part of the software that people typically get into and is the main place that they go. Most softwares have a dashboard, or even if you're a game, you have that initial phase that people are going into before they start what they're doing. So what is that, and can it be more than just pretty and really provide value, and what is the purpose of that to help retain users, is that first screen or that dashboard that a lot of people get into. So that's cool. What we'll be talking about. Awesome. Well, stay safe out there in this crazy pandemic. Cover your mouths, and buy your wife or girlfriend or husband or boyfriend some flowers, bring them home. Doesn't matter that it's Wednesday or not. And that's what we're doing.
And we will see you next time. Thanks. You guys for joining.
Have fun. Bye.